New series.
Go.
Little book, big message.
Uh-huh.
I like it.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me. So people who listen and go to our church or in town probably know that we had a summer series called Minor Prophets, Major Implications.
Uh-huh.
So immediately when our church secretary saw that title, she's like, "You came up with that, didn't you?" And I was like, "Yes. Yes, I did."
Uh-huh.
She's like, because we love Pastor Nick, but he doesn't come up with quirky titles.
Nope.
That is definitely a Ben thing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So we are going to jump in. So the idea of Little Book, Big Message is we're going to, over the next, I think it's 5 weeks, we're tackling the single chapter books.
Yeah.
So today we're in Obadiah.
Obadiah.
Which is really cool because you actually just preached on this, not in, like, just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so it's all really fresh in your head. So for those that are listening,
that was a long time ago. 2 weeks, man.
2 weeks ago. Listen, when you have kids, and people who are listening who have kids will 100% agree. When you have kids, 2 weeks is a very long time. Sorry, I should specify when you have kids that are under seven, right? When they require just a ton of attention.
Yeah.
Just probably to help people, because I don't think Obadiah is necessarily like the first book that rolls off people's lips when they're thinking about which book to read in the Bible.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, maybe for you it is. Just to get some context on the book of Obadiah. So it falls in it's a prophecy against the country of Edom.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you know Edom, it's actually the descendants of Esau. Mm-hmm. So if you go back to our first season where we were talking about Jacob and Esau and this conflict that is going on between them, well, it turns out that those things tend not to go away.
Yeah.
If you have conflict in your family, it tends to follow you generationally.
Yeah.
And so now we actually have this prophecy coming against the country of Edom. And what has happened to Israel at this point is God has warned them. He's like, hey, come back to your covenant, come back to your covenant, come back to your covenant. And then they just kept ignoring him. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to put you in captivity so you learn your lesson. And then I'm going to have you come back and put the covenant on display.
Yeah.
And so the prophecy to Edom is coming as the Israelites are being invaded by Babylon and they're being carted off into captivity. This prophecy is coming against Edom because Edom was doing some shiesty stuff during this time.
Just a little bit.
Like they were coming in and they were actually looting the areas, which is what Obadiah is going to get into a little bit here.
Yeah.
And taking things. And it's actually interesting. I was listening to the Bema podcast where they had the episode, and they were actually talking about how, that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where they go and there's like they find the Grail, but it's this city carved into a mountain. That's actually in the area that is Edom. And they have like these fortresses and stuff. But obviously the Holy Grail is not there.
Yeah.
but like that was actually a thing of the Edomites, is they actually would carve their cities like into the hills.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting. That's not really pertinent to what we're talking about, except they do talk about retreating to your hills.
It is pertinent. Yeah. It is pertinent.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's 100% pertinent because like a lot of it is talking about how Edom's looking down on, how they were looking down on Israel, and is referring to that through the book of Obadiah. And that is both a metaphorical reference and a physical reference of their cities were carved into hillsides. And so like to conquer their cities was a monumentous task because they didn't have artillery or airstrikes or stuff like that. So it was a monumentous task, and so they had kind of this chip on their shoulder of being like, they can't take us.
Yeah.
They can't beat us because of where we're at. And they had this mindset of we're looking down on our brother, both physically and metaphorically.
Got flies in our face.
Yeah.
So summer in Alaska is really fun. Flies in your face, that's the downside to it. The gnats.
Mosquito.
We call them the no-see-ums because they get on your skin. You can't see them, but then you're like, oh, look at all those bite marks.
And then you're like, oh, I just got like 20 bites. Yeah. And so that's how I kind of described Edom a couple weeks ago, Jacob and Esau's relationship. I was like, whenever Jacob and Esau got in the same room, you didn't know if they were going to hug or try to kill each other. Like that was kind of the relationship. It was like what's going to happen next? And that relationship continued on through their descendants.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually even stop in the book of Obadiah because if you actually look further, the country of Edom actually ends up being smack dab in the middle of the spice trade.
Yeah.
Eventually, there is a guy that rises up to incredible wealth and is given dominion over Israel in the time of Jesus. His name is Herod the Great. And if you don't know him, he is actually an Edomite that is trying to be the king of the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you actually, and he's not accepted by the Jewish people. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
But he is actually an Edomite wanting to actually be king of the Jews.
Yeah.
So that's some interesting like history stuff that actually connects even into the New Testament.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, because these books are short, we should just read portions of them and then just talk about it a little bit.
Read the Bible?
I know, right? It's a boring concept.
Yes, we should. Sorry, that was.
Oh man,
I'm a little
I
tired.
can't wait to clip that out and just like be like
out of context.
Yeah, I'm gonna love and out of context.
Yeah. So, but getting into the first few verses that we want, just let's look at verses 1 through 4 to start with. And it says, "This is the vision of the sovereign Lord revealed to Obadiah concerning the land of Edom. We've heard a message from the Lord, we heard a message from the Lord, that ambassador who is sent to the nations to say, 'Get ready, everyone, let's assemble our armies and attack Edom.' The Lord said to Edom, 'I will cut you down to size amongst the nations. You will be greatly despised. You have been deceived by your own pride, because you live in a rock fortress and make your homes high in the mountains. Who can ever reach us way up here?' you ask boastfully. But even if you soar as high as the eagles and build your nest amongst the stars, I will bring you crashing down, says the Lord."
So that is, by the way, one of the things I love about the prophets, and one of the things you should always know when you're reading prophets is poetic prose. Right? They're using a lot of word pictures, but this one is like especially like potent because it's taking something literally that's going on with them, and then it's speaking metaphorically. Yeah, and I just love that.
Yeah, and like jumping on the literal side, the Lord's literally saying, "We're gonna cut you down to size.
Yeah,
like you think you're higher than everybody else, so we're gonna humble you."
Yeah, and well, this also has like some great callbacks to like the whole idea of the Tower of Babel. Yeah, right. Because like you were gonna build our stuff all the way to the heavens, right? We're gonna be high above everybody else. We're gonna be like God.
Yeah, yeah.
God's like, turns out I got a couple thousand feet on you.
Yeah,
you know.
And then you get to verse 4, and the Lord basically saying, it doesn't, like, this is a Spencer translation, it doesn't matter how untouchable you think you are.
Yeah.
Right? We're like, he's like, I'm the Lord, you're not.
Yeah.
Watch me do what I need to do.
Well, I mean, and I mean, how true is that for, I mean, I think always we need to be careful when we hear prophecies against Edom. We're like, oh, well, those are some other people. They can very easily be us. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because how often are we like building our towers or insulating, and we're like, oh, I'm above the nonsense. Right. And we're or you look down on people because of their socioeconomic status or because of where they are. And I was like, you could lose your job, you could lose your house, you could lose like things so quickly. And it's one of the calls to actually live with a generous heart, which is actually the condemnation on the people of Edom, is that instead of looking to Judah and being like, how do we help them? They're like, what can we take from them for ourselves?
Yeah. And that gets into the next few verses.
Yeah.
Where it says, if thieves come at the night and rob you, what disaster awaits you? They would not take everything. Those who harvest grapes always leave a few for the poor, but your enemies will wipe you out completely. Every nook and cranny of Edom will be scorched and looted, or will be searched and looted. Every treasure will be found and taken. Right? So the Lord's going on being like, here's some of the traditions. Like you look at the tradition of gleaning in the fields. Like you see this in Ruth, where Ruth went and she was working the outskirts of the fields and gleaning the leftovers, because Israel was called to leave a portion in their fields for those who can't afford food to go glean for themselves. Right? And so this is something, by the way, the Edomites know Torah. We need to preface that too. Yeah. Like they know Torah.
Well, they're not going to be unfamiliar because it's the text of the people around you. It's like literally your extended family.
Exactly. So they know the bullet points of it. Right? And so here they probably know this idea of gleaning, and the Lord says, yeah, that's not going to happen for you. Yeah. Like you're not going to have that opportunity. Right? And then the Lord starts goes into a little bit more, but then you jump down to verse 10 and it goes into why Edom's being punished.
Yeah, I'm going to read that here. So Spencer and I are using different translations. So if you're following along, Just know we're using different translations,
Mine's
but they're
better.
going to be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
You will be covered with shame and destroyed forever because of the violence done to your brother Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
On the day you stood aloof, on the day strangers captured his wealth, while foreigners entered his gate and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were just like one of them. Do not gloat over your brother in the day of his calamity. Do not rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction. Do not boastfully mock in the day of distress. Do not enter the gate of my people in the day of their disaster. Yes, you. Do not gloat over their misery in the day of their disaster, and do not appropriate their possessions in the day of their disaster. Do not stand at the crossroads to cut off their fugitives, and do not hand over their survivors in the day of distress. Now, I've also just coming back to this idea, like handing over to the implication of a teacher in Old Testament. I forget where he teaches that, but he was saying the implication, the picture you should get for what Edom was doing is essentially Israel's running away, and they're up in their stone fortress, and Babylon comes and they're like, that way, you know, they're like, hey, they went that way, you know, like they're not even providing refuge for the people who are running.
Well, and there's two different types of evil that's going on here. So one, which is actually mentioned in the first couple verses, is the evil of not doing anything.
Correct.
Right? Like, look at verse 11. When they were invaded, you stood aloof, refusing to help. Foreign invaders carried off their wealth, casted lots to divide up Jerusalem, and you acted like one of Israel's enemy. Why'd they act like one of Israel's enemy? Because they stood aloof.
Right.
Because they sat back. Right. So that's one accusation. Then you get on to the next verses, and then that's where they joined in the fun.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, wait, they're doing that, and they're succeeding, so why don't I join in?
So you didn't just do nothing. You actually became part of the problem. Yeah.
Which leads to a personal application for us.
Yeah.
Like when we see someone suffering, like if we don't do anything about that or try to do anything about that, that's just as bad as adding to their suffering.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think when you actually have a heart that never does anything, you eventually become the very person that is now oppressing.
Yeah.
Like it's a subtle shift, but it happens over time.
Yeah.
And I think the caveat here is you can't do everything.
No.
Edom couldn't stand against Babylon. Like that's for sure. They could not do that. Right. But you can do something. And I think the call to like the believer, the follower of Torah, the follower of Jesus is when you see injustice and you do nothing. I mean, coming back to James, do you actually care about justice when you see these things happening?
Can we put that phrase injustice in its context?
Yeah.
Okay. Because a lot of times we have people nowadays who will see what they perceive as an injustice and they'll go blasting all over social media or something like that.
Absolutely.
Right? That's not what we're talking about. Like, we're talking about physically helping somebody in need.
Yeah.
Right? We had a situation in our town where there was this person who got stuck in our town, no place to stay. They were going to be out on the streets, and we were able to offer a couch for them to sleep on.
Right.
Right. That was like serving a physical need.
Yep.
Right. And so like that's a way that you can serve injustice. Right. Was it fair that person's flights got canceled and they were stuck here? Not. I mean, no. I mean, but we could fill the need, and it doesn't really matter why that injustice happened if we can actually provide a place of respite.
If you have somebody who, let's say, found themselves in jail and they come out, but they're having a really hard time finding work, but they're dedicated to putting their life back together, and you don't do anything to help, nothing, you know, it's hard, you know, and we can't do everything, but we should do something.
Edom couldn't defeat Babylon, but they could have welcomed those who were defeated.
Right. And at the very least, they could have not plundered their cities.
Moving on to the next part, right?
Right.
Where like you get into like what was some of the implications. Verse 13, you should not have plundered the land of Israel while they were suffering in such words.
Yeah, so
I'm tired
now going back to your, we're going to read the Bible. That doesn't sound so silly now, does it?
You should not have gloated in their destruction when they were suffering such calamity. You should not have seized their wealth when they were suffering in such calamity. You should not have stood in the crossroads killing those who tried to escape. You should not have captured the survivors and handed them over in their terrible time of trouble.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so then they went from this, like, oh, you stood aloof, to like, wait, we can get something for ourselves in this.
So at this point, when they're coming into verse 15, Tim Mackey was talking about on the Bible Project. He was talking about how the authors use this word Edom, and it's very close to Edom, which is more about humanity. And like there's this play on words here, because on 15 it shifts, and up to this point it's been addressing a literal thing that happened, right? But then it uses Edom as a typecast for all the injustice that's being done in the nations.
Yeah.
And that how God is going to address that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you get to verse 15 and on, and it talks about restoring Israel and destroying Edom.
Yeah.
Right? And you get into this imagery of destroying what is wicked, what is evil. And we got to be very careful with this too, because a lot of times we can take this and go into like militant Christianity mode.
Correct.
Which is not what we're supposed to do here. What we're really supposed to do here is, because you have to tie this whole thing together. In the verses before, Obadiah is calling out Edom. And then the next verses, it's calling Edom to inward retrospect what they've done.
Yeah, and once again, this is prophetic literature, means that it's supposed to evoke pictures.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to evoke pictures that make sense to the people of that time.
Yeah.
And so if you take the pictures from people of that time and you immediately make them the exact same pictures for us today, you're going to get the wrong conclusions, because they don't mean the same things to us. So we have to understand what they meant to them, and then take that and say, as followers of Jesus, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So in verse 15, the day is near where I, the Lord, will judge all godless nations.
Yes.
As you have done to Israel, so will be done to you. Your evil deeds will fall back on your own heads. Just as you swallowed up my people on the holy mountain, so you and the surrounding nations will swallow the punishment I pour out on you. Yes, all you nations will drink and stagger and despair from history.
Yeah.
Very encouraging section.
Well, it is an encouraging section if you're Israel.
Yeah.
Because what God is saying is that he's saying, hey, this injustice that is going around in all of these nations, because you were supposed to be the typecast Israel. You're supposed to show people a different way. Yeah. You're supposed to put my kingdom on display to change the entire world. But injustice won't last forever. I will turn it on its head.
And one thing you need to note in this section is, who is the judge?
God. Yeah.
Not us. Right? We need to be really clear on that. Like Obadiah has levied the complaints against Edom, and then Obadiah delivering the message from the Lord, stating that the Lord is the judge. The day is near when I, the Lord, will judge all nations.
Yeah.
Not the day is near where you, Ben, will judge all nations.
I'm okay with not being the guy to judge all nations.
Oh, me too. God can have that responsibility, right? The judgment is for the Lord.
Yeah.
Right? We are called to be conduits of his love. Right? Conduits of his redemption. And so you can take that and you can actually put us in Obadiah's place, where Obadiah is being a conduit for Israel's redemption in this moment. Right? He's delivering a hard message. Sometimes we have to do that, but it's not Obadiah being the judge. Obadiah is not leading an army to take over Edom. Right. The Lord's taking care of that.
He's declaring a move that is going to be happening from God.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You going to take verse 17?
Yeah. Right. I'm going to take 17 to the end here.
Yeah.
So continuing on in 17, but there will be deliverance on Mount Zion, and it will be holy, which, by the way, should indicate to you that it's not them. It's God doing it, right?
Yeah.
The house of Jacob will dispossess those who dispossess them. Then the house of Jacob will be a blazing fire, and the house of Joseph a burning flame. But the house of Esau will be stubble. Now, hold on real quick here. There going to be a blazing fire. So throughout the Old Testament, who has been the blazing fire? It's been God. So they're saying the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph are actually going to be representative of representing God. Okay. The house of Esau will be stubble, and they will be set on fire and consume them. Therefore, no survivor will remain of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. People from the Negev will possess the hill country of Esau. Those from the Judean foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will possess the territories of Ephraim and Samaria, while Benjamin, that's not me, will possess Gilead. The exiles of the Israelites who are in Halah, who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem who are in Sepharad, will possess the cities of the Negev. Saviors will ascend Mount Zion to rule over the hill country of Esau, but the kingdom will be the Lord's.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of names.
Well, but here's the deal. Like, you have this moment where the day of judgment is the Lord. The Lord's going to restore Israel. The Lord lays out a plan of who's going to be where.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, the Lord, like, here you have Obadiah declaring that the Lord has this all under control. Like, this is very encouraging if you're Israel, because you're like, our troubles are going to be over. They're going to cease. We're going to be restored unto God, right? And we are going to be placed in the spots that he wants us.
So I think I hear two different things here in Obadiah. One is this word to the people: if you are in a safe place, and other people are not, is to have compassion, to reach out, to take care of your brothers and sisters, and to definitely not participate in the abuse. Yeah. Right. That is a good message for us to take. Mm-hmm. That our call, and it resonates with the teachings of Jesus, with the apostles, with everything that we find in the rest of the Bible. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, yes, you're going into captivity. Yes, you're being displaced because you screwed up. Mm-hmm. And I don't know a single Christian who hasn't screwed up and been in this place. Yeah. Where they're like, I am reaping the reward for what I sowed. Right? God still says, I've got a plan. Yep. I'm going to restore. I'm in charge. I'll take care of it. I'll bring you back. Yeah. Like that's a really good word of encouragement when you feel like you're in the middle of chaos because of your own actions. Yep.
Really good word of encouragement. Mm-hmm. And so, so when we are following Christ as a household, right? Like my wife and I, like when we together as a household, mm-hmm. following Christ, one of the things that we've recognized is that the culture of Christ in our household is stronger than anything that he can throw at us. Yeah. And so we recognize when those quote unquote inconveniences come our way, where we have to step outside of our comfort zone and welcome someone into our house or take care of something that's an inconvenience or doesn't fit into our time schedule for the day, right? That our culture in Christ is stronger than mm-hmm. whatever the world can throw at us. And sometimes there's going to be struggles. Sometimes it's going to be really tough, right? Following Jesus isn't easy, and sometimes there's tribulation. Sometimes there's persecution. Other times, it's easy. There's mm-hmm. things that are easy, mm-hmm. right? Like it's both and. Yeah. And but we as believers, we need to be willing to say, you know what? That is a difficult situation that I need to step into. Mm-hmm.
I think also this whole idea of interruptions, stepping out into places maybe where we don't have 100% footing and all that, is also this invitation to engage the Spirit where he's working. Yeah. And they're actually some of the most profound, life-altering, life-shaking moments. Yeah. When you're willing to get a little uncomfortable. Yeah. For the sake of the gospel. Absolutely. By the way, the gospel, not just like declaring the life, death, burial, resurrection of Jesus by the way that we live. Yeah. Right? Right. Absolutely. That there's something different about us. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So there we go. Little book, big message. Mm-hmm. By the way, like spend some time in the minor prophets, spend some time in the prophets. It's difficult sometimes with the language, but there is some really cool stuff that's going on in there. Yeah. And there's always this massive message of hope in the middle of chaos that God is bringing his people through. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, till next time.